This video is brought to you by BTI Institute, a New Jersey leader in certification-based management training.
Welcome, everybody, to another event through the Project Management Institute, New Jersey. We have an Agile discussion group with Larry Solo. Larry is an Agile enthusiast wearing different hats. He is an organizational change and effectiveness consultant. He has a multitude of initiatives under his belt across different companies. He's also been a guest speaker with us, and we're so happy to have Larry back with the popularity that he had. Now, today's topic is on risky business. It almost sounds like a movie here, and Larry's going to keep us engaged. Behind the scenes, we will look at any questions or comments through the chat. Bob Phillips and I will keep monitoring those. We also have a freely available tool, Miro. We're going to put that in the chat, so whenever Larry prompts us, we're going to use that as well. With that, we are in a recorded session. Larry, I will mute myself and give it over to you, and you can start sharing your presentation.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Let me get where I want to be. And that looks like it might be here. And if all is going well, you are looking at a slide that says risky business in PowerPoint. Have we done that?
Yep.
All right, I see a thumbs up, and that's a
Yep, you're
beautiful
good.
thing. So let me kind of dive in. This slide I'm not going to talk to because I think you've already hopefully either read it, and because I hate talking about myself, but I appreciate the introduction that was already provided. I think rather as you kind of just read through that, the piece for me that I'm hopeful will be valuable is that I've got a finger in a lot of different pies, both in terms of education and experience. And so this concept I want to share with you about this evening really crosses traditional project management, agile project management, lean change management, traditional change management, and ding, 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 one of my passions is the notion of complexity. So I'm hopeful this afternoon or this evening now, depending on where you are in the world, to be able to kind of bring that blended experience into this conversation. And so with that, let me just kind of first define a term. You know, risky business, risk management, risk assessment. And this is the dictionary definition. And so it's to expose someone or something valued. And that valued piece is important because there's a lot of things that it's like, who cares? You know, if that's a mosquito over there in the corner and I'm in danger of killing it, well, that's actually not a significant risk to me, although it might be a risk to the mosquito. So as we go through, we're looking at something that has an impact to someone, something, some part of your business. As we look at it, it might be value or danger to your project and your project success, or your client or your organization. So let me just pause there for a second. If you have any thoughts or comments about that, please just blast them in the chat real fast. And I'm going to ask Nitin and Bob to let me know if anything shows up. And if it doesn't, I'll wait a few seconds and then we'll just kind of move forward a little bit. Hearing none. So what kinds of risks do you encounter in your day-to-day? And I guess we could limit it to project management, but I think I will broaden it to your work environment, because I think if we go out to personal risks, spiritual risks, which we could, it just is going to take us too far afield. And by the way, let me see if I can make this zoom a little bit to give you the idea. These are things that in the Department of Transportation, just to give you an example, each of these is a placard because each of those constitutes a risk, a different kind of risk, and with different characteristics and different properties, different ways we identify them, and different ways we mitigate them. So that works really well for truckers, but we're not in the trucking business, or maybe you are. So let me go switch over here into my Miro board and just ask you somewhere, anywhere where you hear, and just kind of, types of risk, and just start putting, and I hope you all know how to grab a sticky note. So yeah, I'm going to grab a sticky note, move it over here, title it types of risk, and just ask you to grab a note, one note per type of risk, and just put yours under here. So take all the time you need in the next 30 seconds or so to what kinds of risks are you dealing with? By the way, no harm, no foul. You can't be wrong. If you've written down something that somebody else is also happens to have been writing down, that's totally fine. We can do a lot of things with these. So just go ahead and grab a note and drag it around and put it underneath this types of risk. Okay, I'm seeing here some starting to get there. So we got data risk coming over, regulatory risk. Oh, absolutely.
Hey, Larry, can I just
This
interrupt
one's
for a moment?
cool. The risk of not meeting expectations.
Larry, can I interrupt for a moment? Can you
Sure.
just share your screen with the Miro board on it so we can all look at that at the same
Oh,
time?
thank you. Yeah, let me get there. I was sharing an application and I needed to be sharing a screen. Yep, hold tight 1 second. Share screen. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. And are you now seeing the Miro board?
Yes, thank you, Larry.
Okay, perfect. Oh, thanks for pointing that out. Complete miss on my part. It looked really good for me. Oh, another nice one, cyber risk. Technology that does not work the way it is advertised or expected to or planned to. Infrastructure updates. We'll come back here. You trying to grab this one. Doesn't want to grab. Key project resources. Uncovering toxic conditions. Okay, so we start to get the idea, and thank you for these. They're great. Scope creep. Ooh, reputational risk. Probability and impact. We're going to come back to that one. So let me flip back into the PowerPoint deck for a minute and ask you to compare yours with these. And again, no right or wrong, but I'm hoping as we come out that these different ways of classifying risk, that you'll find at least one of these that you didn't already know, in which case we win. So one approach that's proven successful is to use the bones of a fishbone diagram, or Ishikawa, or cause and effect, depending on what name you like to give it. There's the 6 M's, but one way to think about it are the ones that I have listed here on screen. So is it a people-related risk, process, material or data? And we've seen those. Machinery or technology, saw those. A metrics risk. Are we measuring the risk of not measuring accurately, completely, the right thing, the right way? Kind of maybe feeds back into the quality of the data. One from traditional project management, right, is a risk to scope, schedule, or budget, our golden triangle. Another, and interesting, as several of you picked up on I think maybe every one of these, almost every one of these. Is it a strategic risk, a compliance or regulatory risk, financial? operational, reputational, I know somebody picked up, global, thinking about a risk that impacts one part of an ecosystem or society, the risk of what a foreign competitor might be doing, or the impact of a change here domestically on your international business, if you have one, and then competitive risk. And just one other way to kind of think about this notion of classifying them is almost not an answer, but answering the question with another question, which is risks to whom or risks to what? So let me pause. And as you think about, and actually let me flip back over to my Miro board. And having heard those and seeing what you all have on here, I think ooh, health risk, cool. So that could be that's part of the people or personal one. So hopefully, and again, these slides will be made available to you after in the I guess it's the LinkedIn site, or no, the PMI site, right? Nitin, so that they have these things available to them afterwards. Okay,
Yes.
so let me kind of flip back over to PowerPoint. And again, I'm moving really quickly because I'd like to make sure that I honor your time and we get through these things. So having classified them, back to you and Miro, what tools do you use to identify them now that we have words for them? And what tools or concepts or techniques do you use to prioritize them? So I'm going to go just move my canvas over here some and add a new post-it note that says identify and prioritize, and ask you to just kind of put the ones in that you use. All right, so anywhere you like, but I did put one up there for you. It's over to the right-hand side of where you had been putting your ideas in. But we'll take them anywhere. Okay, there we go. Now we're cooking. There's a risk register coming up. Oh, there's risk logs. Okay, picked up that one. I'm watching cursors moving, but I'm not, okay, there we go. I'm not necessarily seeing the thing, the post-its making it over to where I'm hoping they are. Okay, adding to a visible product backlog, classic. Jira, yep. Or really any of the kind of automated tools that might be in use depending on your particular client. And actually, somebody had covered over one. I'm going to grab this one here, probably, if I can grab, there you go. Probability and impact. Those are ways that you might actually, especially when you multiply them, that becomes the part of that risk prioritization number, a risk priority matrix. So take all the time you need in the next few seconds to just think about, ooh, okay, I can name them, but how do I identify which ones are relevant to my project? And if I find a bunch, which often happens, how do I figure out which ones are the most significant for me at this point in time? All right, so hopefully we've killed a couple brain cells. I'm going to switch us back over to PowerPoint. And by the way, this document is going to be a live document for a while. So, you have some time, you can fill some more things in. But here are some of the ones that occurred to me, right? One is brainstorming. Whether it's to a cause and effect diagram, just one of the all out, hey, what could go wrong? What are the risks? One of those open-ended questions in any of the various forms that it takes. SWOT analysis, right? Our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. How does that all play itself out? And when we think about particularly the opportunities and threats, we're really in a way identifying what our risks are. And the risk priority matrix, which happens to be one of my favorite tools, right? So we look at each of the different kinds of things or categories, and then we prioritize or assess based on first severity. And the one I'm familiar with uses a 1 to 10 scale. Yours might be 1 to 5, 1 to 7, yeah, however you do that. But I'm going to use 10, and where 10 is on severity is, it would be catastrophic. 1, the other extreme, extremely low severity, which is, yeah, it happened, but nobody would even notice. The P is probability. How likely is that particular risk to occur? And by the way, depending on how you use these, and I've seen it interpreted a couple of different ways. One is, and I'm going to say preferred in air quotes, based on data, evidence, history, feeling like that is the best predictor. Is, hey, what evidence do we have that this particular risk has ever happened? A 10, very probable, virtually guaranteed. 1, I have no evidence that it has ever occurred. There is a different tweak to that. And I invite you, as you're thinking about how you might use this tool or adapt it to your particular purposes, which is not so much to depend on the past, but saying with our combined expertise of the people participating in this process, what do we think is at this point in time, is the probability? Or over the next 30, 60, 90 days, how probable, how likely is it to occur? And that lets us go in a little bit of predictive mode where we do not assume the future is the same as the past. The third piece, and it was named in a different way, and I'm going to language it in a particular way to make the matrix make sense, is what is my level of concern? How concerned am I that I cannot, so double negative, prevent that risk from occurring at all, or that I can't find it and fix it before it does damage? And the reason for languaging it that way is because I want the 10 to be, I am very concerned. I have no way to prevent this, no way to detect it, could not stop it if it did occur. So if it does, it's gonna hurt. A 1 is, I'm glad we identified it. I'm glad we've named this risk. But you know what? I feel really good that we've got controls already in place that this could never happen. I mean, we named it, we were brainstorming, that was all good. Or even if it did, I feel good about whether it's my automated controls, my peer checking, my double checking, my whatever the processes are, that I'd catch it before it did any damage. So in the worst case, the severity, a 10, catastrophic if it occurs. 10, probability, it's gonna. Oh my goodness, it is extraordinarily likely. 10, high level of concern, I can't fix it, I can't prevent it. 10 times 10 times 10. So the maximum risk in this RPN, risk priority number, is 1,000. To go to the other side of the table, we've named a risk, right? And that's where the work we just finished doing in coming up with those naming conventions or classifications. Now we say, even if it happened, yeah, I don't even know that anybody would notice. It's a 1. No big deal. Probability, I don't have any history it ever has. And as I look into the future, I don't have any reason to believe it will. That's a 1. And even if the 1 in a whatever chance that it did happen, we have tools in place that would prevent it or catch it before it did damage. 1 times 1 times 1 is a 1. So a risk priority number using that kind of logic brings you to a place between a 1 and 1,000. And then as a team, as a project, as if you're an RTE, you're working with your Scrum Master's working with your team or product owners, to be able to say, hey, what of this can we live with? And which of these do we need to act on? So let me identify the 2 in the lower right corner for a second. And I call these non-traditional because they're really, well, the 1, identify the pattern, is out of my work in complexity. And so in the world of complexity, where we don't have strict cause and effect, we recognize that there's a whole bunch of variables interacting with a whole bunch of variables in unpredictable, unknowable ways. So it's kind of hard to just guarantee a particular change, a particular risk will behave in a particular way. What we can do in the world of complexity is identify patterns. And so what patterns are currently in place, how we hold our stand up, if you were a Scrum Master, that is risky. It doesn't matter which stand up, whether it was today, yesterday, next week, last week, but our way we do it, the pattern of them, is that I, the Scrum Master, and I'm just going to exaggerate some to make the point that this evening, I do all the talking. I'm looking at my watch every 30 seconds. I'm emphasizing that we need to get out of here fast so that we can get to work. Think there might be some risk in that pattern of stand-ups? And so it doesn't matter whether it was today, next week, or last week, that pattern might be one that creates risk because it closes down the opportunity for free-flowing communication within the team. And then the final one is, again, now it's the new thing, which is if we had an AI model and we were able to feed it enough information, depending on what model it is, and we could write the 8-layer prompt, we could basically ask ChatGPT, what are the biggest risks in this particular situation? And for better or worse, it will give you an answer. Might be a hallucination, but it will give you an answer. So let me switch back into my PowerPoint slide, or I'm in my PowerPoint slide, but let me just get me to my Zoom screen. Stop sharing for a second. Thoughts, comments, questions, if you could put those into chat. Are you finding this, what other tool, does it trigger other tools that you've used? Some people, in fact, one person, in fact, we even had an image of a heat map, might be another tool. Hopefully you've, and let me just say this, I think I probably said it the last time I was with the group. If I think I will have been successful, I hope I will have been successful tonight If you walk away with one thing that you go, oh, I did not know that. One thing that you go, that was surprising. And the third thing is if you walk away with one thing you can try tomorrow, with no guarantee it will work, but one thing you go, you know what? I could use that. I could experiment with that. I could give it a try. So that's my target, that you get a new way to classify, think about naming risk. Right now, that somewhere in that last slide, you've come away with one way at least of thinking of, ooh, that's something I might consider, or a wrinkle on how I'm using a existing tool that I use, and that you can put one of those to work. Nitin, let me check anything in chat.
Just a quick comment and observation. I wrote this one down. You made some really good points on pattern identification, which also get into dysfunctions on Scrum teams, that I work with
Sure.
and navigate. It's almost like sometimes Scrum Masters have to become the shrink of the team. You can only, and people who are so embedded may not realize what they're doing, and it just might be the norm, but it could also just be a dysfunction, and it could be risky. Like I say, if you don't identify some things or don't call it out explicitly, then we cannot address anything as such.
Yeah, thank you, Nitin. Great point. And to just extend that, and this actually gets into, I guess you could call it another brainstorming technique. Call it the devil's advocate technique, right? It's the contrarian process of explicitly, building on your point, explicitly asking, what is the risk of our doing this way? If we wanted to take pot shots at our process, what would somebody who wanted to tear it down say? And so, oh, and I just had a brain cramp. There is a brainstorming technique that says, how could I make this worse? Not how can I improve it? How could I make it worse? If I wanted to do the worst possible job of this process, what would it be? And then in doing that, it helps identify the risks, the downsides, the concerns. Many people, by the way, I'm one, I'm way better at thinking of what could go wrong sometimes than what could go right. So by explicitly taking off the blinders and the guardrails and saying, hey, now remember, we're brainstorming. Because I say it doesn't mean it's real, doesn't mean it's true, doesn't mean it's going to happen. But if I really wanted to build the worst quality widget, what would I do? If I really wanted to hold the worst stand-up, the worst PI, I wanted to do the worst, name your ceremony. And then look and just see how that changes the conversation, how it changes the pattern. So thank you
That's
for
interesting.
adding that in, because that one had been off my radar screen. And by the way, that process of brainstorming to the worst does have a name. I just can't remember what it is. All right. Let me kind of come back then here. We're cruising.
And very quickly, Paul had a quick comment. I like the three-dimensional view of the matrix discussed, or the RPN 10 by 10 by 10. Just some more appreciation there.
That's great. Thank you. So, great. We found risks, right? We've named them. We've even found ones that have, for using whatever tools and techniques are there now. And again, it could be Jira, it could be whatever it is. Okay, now we're gonna, these we have to act on. So let me kind of come back to my Miro board and tool, and I'm gonna just kind of drag my canvas back over to the right again and add a new post-it. and it says tools to mitigate. And what do you use? When are there particular techniques you use when somebody says, oh crap, if that happens, that would be catastrophic. What are we going to do about it?
Larry, how about you share the screen again so we can see in real time
Ah,
what people
yes.
are writing?
I forgot I took it off. Thank you again. It's so great that you guys are there to help me do with that stuff because I only see what I see. All right. Thank you, Nitin. Here we go. Particular tools or techniques from my from my problem solving Six Sigma days. And I'm just making myself laugh because this was one of my clients' company cultures was, we don't need no tools, find it and fix it, was the total extent of the process that they had available to them. Wasn't always successful. So we ended up teaching Lean Six Sigma and project management tools to give them a little bit more rigor. Okay, influence maps. Yes, having guidelines. That's perfect. Being intentional about timing. You know, the when we investigate it, when we're going to implement our solutions. That one actually, because if you get that wrong, I thank you, whoever wrote that one. I think that's a great point. Because you can have a great solution that's implemented the wrong time, and it created more problems than than it tried to solve. So love that one. There's something that's down here. Oh yeah. You know, charm, influence, you know, pick your word. I think that is absolutely a huge, genuine technique. You know, if we can't bring, and it kind of speaks to my change management heart, if you don't bring the people with you, the ones that are going to have to implement it, the ones that are going to have to sustain it over time, then you have a new risk, which is good solution, quickly implemented, not sustainable. And that sustainability piece is in large part bringing the people along with you, figuring out what everybody will live with and align around. And by the way, if you're fans of lean change management, which is a relatively new version of change management that kind of combines lean, change, and complexity, we talk about alignment, not agreement, because not everybody's going to like every change. You know, I mean, as agilists, the thing, you know, it would be nice to have consensus, but sometimes the world just in reality doesn't allow that. But what we can negotiate, to use the words that are up there, are alignment, which is, okay, I understand you don't like it. We hear you. We've heard your point. Now I expect you to recognizing other people's points to support this in your behavior. Okay, so pen test, yes, love that. In fact, not only any kind of penetration test, alpha tests, beta tests, trying it small, pilots, great ideas, especially in an agile environment where things are changing so quickly. You know, let's get something out there, kick the tires, learn fast. Pilots, yep. Establishing a backup, yes, absolutely. Oh, come back here. Where's that thing? Where did it go? Okay. So let's just hold on to those. Again, I want to make sure we get enough time to continue conversation. So let me share a couple that I've seen and used in out of different bodies of knowledge. And I didn't even put traditional problem solving. I mean, I think that's probably a given. But one thing particular to risk is what can we do to prevent it from occurring in the first place? How do we detect it before it can do damage? And that's that second half of the phrase is the phrase that matters more. Because if I can see it happening, can I stop it before it gets to the next step in the process? If not, even though I detected it, it's still going to have to get reworked or cleaned up down the road. And then that's the mitigate. The another way, and again, I'll throw this one out there for your, hopefully it's a little earworm, the 1-10-100 rule, if you haven't heard that one in a while. It takes 1 unit of resource, time, talent, treasure, money, to prevent an issue or defect from occurring. It probably takes 10 times that to catch it before it does damage, but it takes 100 units of rework, customer irritation, employee abrasion to fix it or mitigate it once the damage has been done. So in your heads, the 1-10-100 rule. Another language that, again, particular to risk, one, and this is going to follow on with the one that follows, they're really kind of sort of saying the same thing. I accept this risk. You know what? Again, if we think about that risk prioritization that we were talking about, because its severity is so small, or its probability of occurrence is so small, I'm willing to, okay, if it happens, we'll deal with it. Can I avoid it? And now we're in prevention. Can I transfer the risk? Can I find a way to move it from a place where it does maximum damage to a place where it might do less or not be damaged at all? Is there a way to get it out of mission critical path to a supplemental process where it's still damage, but it's not creating nearly the amount of damage it does where the risk is currently situated? And then can we reduce it? I can't make it go away, but here are the steps I can use to minimize it. Okay, I want to make this next one a pop quiz for all of you. I'm going to come back, move my screen, I hope, back to Miro. And for absolutely nothing, because I don't have any prizes, but I'm going to just put another Post-it note out here for Rome. And what does it stand for? Grab a Post-it and put either whatever letters of that you remember or recognize. There's also a little T for a text box that you could write just the words in. But what is it to roam a risk? Yep. Okay. We got the O. Okay. Yep. Okay. We got the R. Yeah. Okay. Close. The A is well, actually, it could be whatever we want it to be. The way I'm familiar with it is the A is accept. There you go. Okay, so there's another way if we jump back into the PowerPoint, right? So it's kind of, again, fairly similar to this. So hey, here's a risk. We fixed it. We resolved it. We know who owns it. This is mine. I'm gonna take care of this. I'm gonna just live with it. And we have an action plan, or we'll develop one. Let me just kind of drop down to this last thing here. And again, for ones that maybe aren't quite in the traditional thought process. One is, and this actually came from a mentor when I was working at Harley Davidson back 100 years ago. And in thinking about all the different things we could do, my manager said, Larry, you know what? You can do all the analytics you want, but go where the energy is. Find people who want to fix it. Because if you want to fix it, but nobody else cares, it's like pushing a rope up from the bottom and trying to get some traction. So somewhere, where are people passionate? Either because the opportunity is so great, because the pain is so great, because the risk is so great that people are willing to commit time, effort, energy, and resources to resolving it. So, doing the analytics is great, but if nobody cares, you're wasting your time. So think about that in your next stand-up, in your next retrospective. And, because, hey, folks, what of our things, I'm going to use some slightly politically incorrect language, pisses you off more than anything else in the work that we do or the way that we do it? If you could change one thing, what just really gets under your fingernails? And when you see people getting red and their blood pressure going up, you've actually found something. So that's just maybe something a little bit out of the ordinary to think about. A second one comes right back to having identified patterns, right? So now we're back in complexity. Well, I can't guarantee change. What I can do are try experiments. I can try to perturb the pattern. So if my pattern was me talking too much, me looking at my watch as the scrum master, me emphasizing, maybe I'm going to say, who would like to run the retrospect? Who's going to run our stand up today? Or we're going to rotate it. Or challenge somebody to do the opposite of what I do every day. Okay, I'm going to buy pizza, or I've got a donut for the person who runs this next stand up exactly opposite to the way I do. And people will stare at you and they'll be scratching their heads and maybe a little drool coming out of a corner. And that's exactly what you want, is to just, you've named a pattern and made it okay to change it. So think about these, maybe it's just this out of the box way of a banging on something to get people to think differently about it. I think Nitin had said, that sometimes we get, we see it so often, we just take it for granted or as a given. Let me tell you one other very quick Harley Davidson story. I was on the manufacturing floor. I'd been there all about 4 or 5 weeks. And I noticed that our forklift drivers would go, racing down their lanes and then come to almost a halt. And they would go down into this dip into the floor, being very careful not to let the forks, and because they were moving chrome plated parts, and if they got jiggled together, we ruined them, and that would cost us a lot of money. And then they would come back up on the other side of this rut in the floor, and then they would head off again at warp speed. And they did this day after day. And after watching for a couple of weeks, I just asked somebody, said, why don't we fix the floor? And they stared at me. They were proud of the fact that they had to use their skill and finesse as forklift drivers to not damage the parts. But no, it had never occurred to them that maybe they could fix the floor. So by the way, we did, and productivity went up, but it was just questioning the things that we don't usually question. The final one on this slide, again, same kind of deal. Having identified a particular risk, especially in some of the larger models, large language-based generative AI models, you could say, hey, if I write that layered prompt, here's my role, here is the situation that I'm dealing with, here's the thing that I've already tried, here are the constraints in which I'm working. Please give me 3 evidence-based potential solutions with your rationale for each. I am not suggesting that it will be right. I am suggesting it may stimulate your thinking in a different way than you were thinking about it before. So trying to keep me honest, Nitin, I'm going to stop sharing here for a second. Let me pause. Questions, thoughts, comments, please put them in chat right now. Anything there? Again, as you listen to those, is there another technique you found successful in addressing risks? Maybe one that's not as traditional as some others? The chat box is yours.
Some good points there, Larry. I'll just call out one thing. There was a question about should we just get the stakeholders to list all the risks and not the PMs? And there's some back and forth, but you could share your thoughts on that as well if you'd like.
Sure. I love that. I think it's a both and. Each of us brings a perception from a different, from our own point of view. I think we get to, and in fact, if you really want to extend that same thought, we could almost look at any risk from risk to the customer, risk to the product or process, service, risk to the employee, risk, regulatory risk. It actually goes back to those classifications of risk that we talked about in the beginning of the presentation. And in fact, that's valuable because what might be really important to us as manufacturers of a product or service, customer might not care about. Or a thing that we think the customer should not care about, they care about a lot. So kind of trying to hold both points of view, to me, I think has a ton of value. All right, so let me go back to share my screen.
Thank you.
This time, at least I remember that. So as we kind of move towards the end of the scheduled time, and I know we've got some buffer time at the end for people who'd like to stay, as a kind of a closing thought, again, this is still, and I think virtually always, about people, because we identify them, we prioritize them, we need our stakeholders, our project team members, our product owners, all the different constituencies to be able to not just put a Band-Aid on it, but create sustainable risk management, change, and improvement. You know, that the Chinese yin yang kind of thing, you know, danger and opportunity. So as we think about risk, it's either OMG, you know, oh heavens, that is horrifying. The word risk is something to be avoided at all cost. Or, especially if it's a risk inherent in something, maybe it's a springboard for brand new thinking, new processes, new approaches that provide competitive advantage, you know, to us as an organization, to us as project managers, to our customers, to the organization. So that, and let me just kind of end the, you know, the prepared remarks here. These are a couple of books that I've co-authored. The one on the left, I actually like more than it's the second one I wrote or co-authored rather than the first. But this, if you're interested in the conversation about complexity and how complexity shows up in organizations, our Denise Easton and I tried to create a language to be able to make these notions of complexity discussable, you know, in practical, usable terms for folks who are trying to make change happen. And that's our work. So I'm going to come off that. Again, the slides will be available to you in the usual channels afterwards. So let me stop sharing. And questions, thoughts, comments, responses. Let me turn it back. Oh, do I still have the last slide? What I think I do. Do I?
I think the
Oh,
last slide is more on any
yeah.
PDU
I didn't.
information or chapter announcements.
Yeah.
So
Do one of you guys have that? Because I didn't. I don't think I have the template, but not the specific claim code thing for it.
yeah, we will share that with the members, and also
Okay. Cool.
if you're automated enough, when we register, sometimes people see it there as well. But we'll take care of that. But
Okay.
let's
Perfect.
open it up. We've got about 2 minutes before we stop recording. Does anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts, feedback? We can put in the chat before
Yeah.
we open up to informal session.
Again, my hope is you learned one new thing, you were surprised by at least one thing, and you found at least one thing you can experiment with or try, you know, in your work in the near future. So that's kind of my checklist. I'm hoping you found at least one. If we provide, you know, if it was a little bit or a lot provocative, that's always a good sign. But this notion of risk it's there. It's always there. And so any ways, the more explicitly, precisely we can talk about it, I think we do a service to, you know, our teams. So thoughts, comments, please do put them in the chat. Hopefully this was a good use of your time.
I see. I like the tools to identify risks that were discussed by a member.
Sweet.
Some notes of thanks and remembering to roam. Alrighty, I'll do a quick time check.
Thank you, Larry, for the presentation again. Thank you very much for talking about risk. Obviously, a clearly important topic. And look out